Lydia Park's hands trembled as she signed the divorce papers beneath a glowing Christmas tree, surrounded by champagne laughter and holiday cheer. Her husband didn't even look at her, just slid the pen across the marble table like she was a business transaction to close before midnight. The gala sparkled around them, golden and bright, while her marriage ended in silence. No one noticed. No one cared. When the ink dried, he walked away without a word, leaving her alone in a room full of strangers. Lydia stood, numb and invisible, wondering if she had ever really existed at all. If you're ready to follow Lydia's journey from heartbreak to power, from invisibility to a love that never looks away, stay with me until the end. Hit that like button and comment what city you're watching from so I can see how far this story travels. The Peninsula Hotel ballroom glittered like a jewelry box turned inside out. Crystal chandeliers cascaded light across marble floors, reflecting off champagne flutes and diamond earrings and the gold-threaded gowns of Chicago's elite. A 20-foot Christmas tree dominated the center of the room, draped in white lights and silver ornaments that caught the glow like captured stars. Somewhere, a string quartet played Vivaldi, the notes precise and cold. Lydia Park stood near the dessert table, a glass of untouched champagne warming in her hand, watching her husband work the room. He moved like he owned the space, because in many ways he did. James Park, senior partner at Whitmore and Associates, third-generation legacy, Yale law graduate, and the kind of man who wore power like a second skin. Tonight he wore a Tom Ford tuxedo and a smile that never quite reached his eyes, shaking hands with judges and CEOs and city council members who needed his favor. Lydia wore emerald green silk that cost more than her monthly teaching salary. James had chosen it. He always chose. "Lydia, darling, there you are." She turned to find Amanda Whitmore gliding toward her, resplendent in champagne-colored lace, her smile as sharp as cut glass. "Amanda, Merry Christmas." "Isn't this just magical?" Amanda gestured grandly at the ballroom. "Charles outdid himself this year, though between you and me, I told him the tree was excessive. But you know men, they never listen." She laughed, bright and brittle. "Speaking of which, where's that handsome husband of yours?" Lydia's smile felt like it might crack her face. "Networking. You know James." "Don't I just?" Amanda leaned closer, her perfume overwhelming. "Actually, I wanted to catch you. We're having a New Year's brunch at the club, just the inner circle. You and James will come, won't you?" Before Lydia could answer, James appeared at her elbow. His hand found the small of her back, the touch familiar and completely impersonal. "Amanda, you look stunning as always." Amanda preened. "James, I was just extending an invitation for New Year's brunch. We wouldn't miss it." James's fingers pressed against Lydia's spine. Not quite painful, but close. A reminder. "Though I'm afraid I need to steal my wife for a moment. Business, you understand." Of course, of course." Amanda waved them away, already scanning the room for her next conversation. James guided Lydia through the crowd, his hand never leaving her back, steering her like a piece of furniture he needed to rearrange. They passed clusters of conversation, laughter about ski trips to Aspen, complaints about contractors renovating Lake Forest estates, gossip about who was sleeping with whose spouse. No one looked at Lydia. They never did. James led her through a side door, down a quieter hallway lined with art and away from the party noise. The sounds of the gala faded to a distant hum. He stopped near a window overlooking Michigan Avenue, where holiday lights twinkled against the December darkness. "We need to talk," James said. Something in his tone made Lydia's stomach drop. She knew that voice. Cool, detached, the same one he used to fire associates or reject settlement offers. "Here?" She glanced back toward the ballroom. "Now?" "It's perfect timing, actually." James reached into his inner jacket pocket and pulled out a manila folder. Not thick, just a few pages. Clean, efficient, no scene. Lydia stared at the folder. "What is that?" "Divorce papers." He said it the way someone might say quarterly reports or lunch reservations. Factual, bloodless. "I had Mitchell draw them up last week. Everything's very straightforward. You keep your teacher's pension, I keep the house and the investment accounts. You'll have 60 days to move out, which should be plenty of time." The hallway tilted. Lydia gripped the edge of a console table, her champagne glass forgotten. "You're divorcing me? At a Christmas party?" It seemed as good a time as any. James opened the folder, revealing neat rows of legal text. Everyone's distracted, happy. No one will notice, no one will care, and we can both get on with our lives without the tedious spectacle of a public separation. James, don't make this dramatic, Lydia. We both know this marriage has been over for years. He pulled a pen from his pocket, a Mont Blanc, expensive and cold. You're miserable. I'm indifferent. And frankly, maintaining the pretense has become exhausting. This way is cleaner. Lydia's hands shook. 7 years. 7 years of trying to be enough, trying to fit into his world, trying to become the wife he wanted. 7 years of dinner parties where she smiled and nodded and disappeared into the wallpaper. 7 years of sleeping in separate bedrooms and having conversations that never went deeper than weather and schedules. Is there someone else? Her voice came out smaller than she wanted. James looked genuinely puzzled. Does it matter? It matters to me. He sighed like she was being unnecessarily difficult. Catherine Meredith. We've been seeing each other for about 6 months. She's an associate at the firm, sharp, ambitious, connected. Her father sits on 3 corporate boards. He said it without guilt, without apology, like he was listing her qualifications for a job. She fits, Lydia, in ways you never did. The words hit like a physical blow. Lydia had known, on some level, that James didn't love her. Maybe had never loved her. But hearing it stated so plainly, so casually, carved something vital out of her chest. Why did you marry me? She whispered. Honestly, you were safe, sweet, undemanding. James's expression didn't change. I was 28. My mother was pressuring me to settle down, and you seemed like you'd be easy to manage. And you were, for a while. He held out the pen. But we've both outgrown this arrangement. Sign the papers, Lydia. Let's end this with dignity. Dignity. As if any of this had dignity. Lydia looked at the papers, then at James, then back at the papers. Her whole adult life, reduced to 3 pages of legal text. Her marriage, ending in a hotel hallway while a party sparkled 1 room away. She thought about fighting, screaming, throwing her champagne in his face and making the scene he was so desperate to avoid. But what would be the point? James was right about one thing. Their marriage had been dead for years. Maybe it had never been alive at all. She'd just been too afraid to admit it, too invested in the fantasy of what she'd thought love should look like. Lydia took the pen. Her hand shook as she signed her name. 3 places, each signature a small death. Lydia Marie Park. The ink looked black against the white paper. Final. James took the folder back, checking each signature with the practiced eye of an attorney. I'll have Mitchell file these after the holiday. You have until February 15th to vacate the house. I've already had your bank account separated. You'll find the details in the final page. He tucked the folder back into his jacket, smoothed his lapels, and looked at her one last time. For what it's worth, Lydia, I hope you find whatever it is you're looking for. You're a good person, just not the right person for me. Then he walked away. Didn't look back, just returned to the party, his shoulders straight, his step light, like he'd just concluded a successful business deal. Lydia stood alone in the hallway, the pen still in her hand, her marriage over. The sounds of the party drifted through the walls. Laughter, music, the clink of glasses. People celebrating. People who had no idea that her entire life had just ended. She set the champagne glass on the console table, dropped the pen beside it. Her hands were numb. She couldn't go back into that ballroom, couldn't smile and make small talk and pretend everything was fine while her world crumbled. Couldn't watch James laugh with Catherine Meredith, because of course she was here. Of course she was at this party, probably waiting for James to return with the signed papers so they could celebrate their victory. Lydia walked. Away from the ballroom, away from the music and light. She found a service hallway, quieter and dimmer, lined with doors marked staff only and storage. Her heels clicked against tile floors. She couldn't feel her feet. The hallway ended at a door marked emergency exit. Lydia pushed through it, expecting an alarm, but there was only silence. She found herself on a back stairwell, industrial and cold, the kind of space guests were never supposed to see. She sat down on the concrete steps, her green silk dress pooling around her like spilled paint, and finally let herself cry. Not loud, not dramatic, just quiet, hopeless tears that slid down her face and dripped onto her hands. 7 years. Gone. Dismissed. Reduced to nothing more than an inconvenience James had finally bothered to resolve. The worst part wasn't the divorce itself. It was the knowing. The confirmation of what she'd suspected for so long, that she'd never mattered. That she'd been temporary from the start. That James had looked at her and seen nothing worth keeping. Invisible. Even to her own husband. "Excuse me, are you all right?" Lydia's head snapped up. A man stood at the top of the stairwell, silhouetted against the light from the floor above. Tall, broad-shouldered, wearing a charcoal suit that fit like it had been made for him. She couldn't see his face clearly, but his voice was deep and careful, like he was approaching something fragile. "I'm fine," Lydia said automatically, swiping at her tears. "Just needed some air." "In a stairwell?" Despite everything, she almost laughed. "It was the first door I found." The man descended the stairs slowly, giving her time to object. As he came closer, Lydia could see him better. Dark hair swept back, strong features, eyes that were almost black in the dim light. Mid-30s, maybe. There was something about the way he moved, controlled and deliberate, like a predator who'd learned perfect stillness. He stopped a few steps above her, close enough to talk but far enough to give her space. "Bad night?" he asked. "You could say that." Lydia tried to smile, but it crumbled. "Actually, it's been a bad year. Tonight was just the finale." The man studied her with an intensity that should have felt invasive but somehow didn't, like he actually saw her, not through her, not past her, but her. "What happened?" Lydia didn't know why she answered. Didn't know why she told this complete stranger the truth she couldn't bring herself to say to anyone else. "My husband just divorced me at a Christmas party in a hallway." She laughed, brittle and broken. "He had the papers ready. All I had to do was sign, clean, efficient, no scene." The man's jaw tightened. "What's his name?" Something in his tone made Lydia look up sharply. There was anger there, cold and controlled, simmering just beneath the surface. "Why?" "Because any man who would humiliate his wife like that deserves to have his name remembered." "It doesn't matter." Lydia shook her head. "It's done. I signed the papers, he got what he wanted, and now I'm just—" Her voice broke. "I'm just sitting in a stairwell, crying in a dress that cost $3,000, wondering what the hell I'm supposed to do now." The man was quiet for a moment. Then he shrugged off his suit jacket and held it out to her. "You're shaking." Lydia looked down. He was right. Her whole body trembled. Whether from cold or shock, she couldn't tell. She took the jacket, wrapped it around her shoulders. It smelled like expensive cologne and something darker, like smoke and winter nights. "Thank you." "Victor," he said. "Victor Romano." "Lydia Park." She pulled the jacket tighter. "Though I guess I won't be a Park much longer." Victor sat down on the step beside her. Not too close, but close enough that his presence felt solid and real. An anchor in a night that had become completely untethered. "How long were you married?" 7 years. Lydia stared at her hands. "I was 23 when we got married. Young, stupid. I thought I was lucky. James was handsome and successful and confident. I thought he'd chosen me because he saw something special." She laughed bitterly. "Turns out he chose me because I was convenient, easy to manage, safe." "You don't strike me as easy to manage." "You don't know me." "No," Victor agreed. "But I know what I see, and what I see is a woman who's been diminished by someone who didn't deserve her in the first place." Lydia turned to look at him. Really look at him. There was something magnetic about Victor Romano, something that pulled attention like gravity. His face was all sharp angles and controlled power, but his eyes held something darker, dangerous maybe, but not dangerous to her. "You don't know anything about me," she said again, softer this time. "I know you're sitting in a service stairwell instead of making a scene. I know you signed papers that ripped your life apart because it was easier than fighting. I know you're crying in the dark because you don't want anyone to see you break." Victor's voice was steady, certain. "I know you've been invisible for too long." The words hit something deep inside her chest. True. Too true. "What are you doing here?" Lydia asked. At the party, I mean. You don't seem like the charity gala type. I'm not, but I was invited, and sometimes appearances matter. He smiled, just barely. Though I'm finding the stairwell much more interesting than the ballroom. You should go back. The party can survive without me. Victor stood, extended his hand. Come on. Lydia stared at his hand. Where? Away from here. Somewhere you can breathe, somewhere you don't have to be invisible. She should say no. Should thank him for his kindness and send him back to the party and figure out her own life without involving a stranger. Should be smart and careful and all the things she'd always been. But those things had gotten her nothing but a failed marriage and a heart that felt like shattered glass. Lydia took his hand. Victor pulled her to her feet gently, like she was made of something precious. His hand was warm, solid, real. He didn't let go immediately. I'm parked outside. We can go wherever you want. Somewhere quiet, somewhere loud, somewhere you can scream if you need to. Your choice. I don't even know you. No, Victor agreed. But you know your husband, and look where that got you. He had a point. Lydia glanced back toward the door that led to the party, to the ballroom where James was probably already celebrating his freedom with Catherine Meredith, back to a life where she'd been nothing more than set dressing for someone else's success. Then she looked at Victor, this stranger with dark eyes and careful hands who'd found her crying in a stairwell and offered her something she hadn't felt in years, the sense that someone actually saw her. Somewhere quiet, she said. Please. Victor nodded once, definitive. He led her down the stairwell, through another service exit, and out into the freezing December night. The air hit like a slap, sharp and clean, cutting through the fog of shock that had wrapped around her brain. A black Mercedes waited at the curb, sleek and expensive. Victor opened the passenger door, waited until she was settled, then closed it with careful precision. He moved around to the driver's side, slid behind the wheel, started the engine. Heat poured from the vents immediately. Lydia hugged his jacket tighter, breathing in the scent of it, trying to ground herself in something solid. Where do you live? Victor asked. Lincoln Park, but Lydia stopped. She couldn't go home. That house wasn't hers anymore. James had made that clear. February 15th, he'd said. 60 days to erase 7 years. I don't want to go home, she finished quietly. Victor pulled away from the curb, smooth and controlled. Then we won't. They drove through Chicago's holiday-lit streets in silence. The city glittered around them, window displays and light poles wrapped in garland, ice skaters at Millennium Park, families bundled against the cold. Everyone looked happy. Everyone looked whole. Lydia felt like she was watching it all from behind glass. Victor drove with the same controlled precision he did everything else. One hand on the wheel, the other resting on his thigh, his expression calm and focused. He didn't try to fill the silence with empty conversation, just drove. 20 minutes later, they pulled up to a building on the Gold Coast, all glass and steel and understated wealth. A valet appeared immediately, opening Victor's door. Mr. Romano? Good evening, sir. Michael. Victor came around to Lydia's side, offered his hand again. We'll be upstairs. The valet didn't even glance at Lydia's tear-stained face or wrinkled dress, just nodded professionally and took the keys. Victor guided Lydia through a lobby that looked like something from an architecture magazine. Marble floors, contemporary art, a Christmas tree that was elegant and minimal, nothing like the ostentatious display at the peninsula. An elevator opened immediately, like it had been waiting for them. They rode up in silence. Lydia watched the floor numbers climb, 20, 30, 40. The elevator opened directly into a penthouse apartment. Lydia stepped inside and stopped. Floor-to-ceiling windows dominated the far wall, offering a view of Chicago that stretched for miles. The city sprawled below them, lights twinkling against the darkness of Lake Michigan. The apartment itself was beautiful in a stark masculine way. Clean lines, dark wood, leather furniture. Expensive, but not showy. Everything in its place. Sit, Victor said, gesturing to a leather sofa near the windows. I'll get you something to drink. Lydia sank onto the sofa, still wrapped in his jacket, and stared out at the city. From up here, everything looked small, manageable, like problems were just tiny pinpricks of light that couldn't really hurt you. Victor returned with 2 glasses of amber liquid. He handed her one, sat in the chair across from her. "Whiskey," he said. "Good whiskey. It won't fix anything, but it might help you feel less numb." Lydia took a sip. The whiskey burned going down, rich and smoky. She took another sip, then another, feeling warmth spread through her chest. "Thank you," she said, "for this, for getting me out of there. You didn't have to." "I know." "Then why did you?" Victor was quiet for a moment, studying her over the rim of his glass. "Because you looked like you needed someone to see you, and I did." Something about the way he said it made Lydia's breath catch. Not romantic, not predatory, just honest, simple, true. "I don't understand what I did wrong," she whispered. "I tried so hard to be what James needed. I went to his firm dinners, I smiled at his clients, I made sure the house was perfect, and I never complained when he worked late or forgot our anniversary or—" Her voice cracked. "I loved him, and it was never enough. It wasn't about you." "How can you know that?" "Because men like your husband, they don't want partners. They want accessories. Something that looks good and doesn't make demands." Victor leaned forward, his expression intense. You could have been perfect, and it wouldn't have mattered, because perfect wasn't what he wanted. He wanted small, manageable, forgettable. Tears spilled down Lydia's cheeks again. "I was so invisible." "You're not invisible now." Lydia looked up, met Victor's eyes. Dark, penetrating, seeing her in a way that felt almost frightening in its intensity. "Who are you?" she asked. "Really?" "Someone who understands what it's like to be underestimated. Someone who knows that power isn't about being loud or demanding attention. It's about control, precision, knowing exactly who you are and what you're worth." He paused. "And someone who thinks you've forgotten what you're worth." "I don't know what I'm worth anymore." "Then let me tell you." Victor set his glass down, his gaze never leaving hers. "You're worth more than a man who divorces you at a Christmas party. You're worth more than 7 years of being diminished and dismissed. You're worth more than crying alone in stairwells and wondering why you weren't enough." Lydia couldn't breathe. The words hit something raw and bleeding inside her, something she'd been trying to ignore for so long. "I don't know how to start over," she whispered. "I don't know how to be alone. I've been with James since I was 23. I don't even know who I am without him." "Then find out." Victor's voice was steady, certain. "Take your time. Figure out what you want, what you need, what you won't settle for anymore." "What if I fail?" "Then you fail. But at least you'll fail on your own terms, not someone else's." Lydia finished her whiskey, set the glass down with trembling hands. The night felt surreal. Sitting in a stranger's penthouse, accepting comfort from a man she'd met an hour ago, her marriage over and her future completely uncertain. But for the first time in years, she felt something other than numb. She felt seen. "I should go," she said, though she didn't move. "You've been so kind, but I've taken up enough of your time." "Where will you go?" "Good question." The house in Lincoln Park didn't feel like home anymore. She had friends, but none close enough to show up at midnight crying about a divorce they'd probably all seen coming. Her parents lived in Seattle, and calling them would mean explanations she didn't have the energy for. "A hotel, I guess, just for tonight. Tomorrow I'll figure out something more permanent." Victor stood. "Stay here." Lydia's eyes widened. "I can't. I have guest rooms, 3 of them. Take your pick. Stay the night, get some sleep, and tomorrow we'll figure out your next steps." He held up a hand before she could protest. "No expectations, no strings, just a safe place to land." Lydia should say no, should maintain boundaries with this man she didn't know, should be smart and careful and protected. But she was so tired of being careful, so tired of doing what she should. "Okay," she whispered, "just for tonight." Victor nodded, satisfied. He showed her to a guest room, beautiful and impersonal, decorated in soft grays and whites, a bathroom with a soaking tub, towels that looked like they'd never been used. "There are clothes in the closet if you need them," Victor said from the doorway. "Extra toothbrush in the bathroom. Take whatever you need." "Thank you, Victor. Really." He looked at her for a long moment, something unreadable in his dark eyes. "Get some rest, Lydia. Tomorrow's going to be better." Then he was gone, closing the door softly behind him. Lydia stood in the middle of the guest room, still wearing her green silk dress and Victor's jacket, and finally let herself fall apart. She sank onto the bed and cried, great heaving sobs that shook her whole body. 7 years. 7 years of trying and failing and being not enough. But tomorrow, Victor had said, tomorrow would be better. Lydia wasn't sure she believed him. But in this moment, in this stranger's guest room with the city lights glittering through the windows, she wanted to. She wanted to so badly. Lydia woke to unfamiliar silence. No alarm. No sound of James already up and moving through the house, coffee brewing, morning news murmuring from the kitchen television. Just quiet, deep and complete, broken only by the distant hum of the city far below. For a moment she couldn't remember where she was. The bed was too soft. The sheets too expensive, the room too perfectly decorated. Then memory crashed back, the party, the divorce papers, the stairwell, Victor Romano's dark eyes and careful hands, his penthouse overlooking Chicago. Lydia sat up slowly, her head pounding. She was still wearing the green silk dress, now hopelessly wrinkled, Victor's jacket draped over a nearby chair. Pale winter sunlight streamed through floor-to-ceiling windows, making her squint. Her phone sat on the nightstand. She must have pulled it from her clutch before collapsing last night. 17 missed calls. 32 text messages. She didn't need to check to know most were from James, probably asking where she'd gone, irritated that she'd left the party early and made him look bad. She turned the phone face down and didn't look again. The guest bathroom was pristine, all marble and chrome, with towels so plush they felt obscene. Lydia found the promised toothbrush still in its packaging, used it gratefully, then stared at herself in the mirror. She looked like wreckage, smudged mascara, tangled hair, the kind of exhaustion that lived in bones rather than just muscles. But underneath the mess, something else flickered, something that hadn't been there yesterday. A spark. Small, fragile, but real. She washed her face, did what she could with her hair, then ventured out of the bedroom. The penthouse looked different in daylight, less stark, more lived in. Morning sun poured through the windows, illuminating details she'd missed last night. Books lined built-in shelves, their spines worn from actual reading. A chess set sat on a side table mid-game, like someone played against themselves. Art on the walls, not the kind bought to impress, but pieces chosen with care. The smell of coffee led her to the kitchen. Victor stood at the counter, dressed in dark slacks and a white dress shirt, sleeves rolled to his forearms. He was reading something on his phone, a cup of coffee steaming beside him. When Lydia entered, he looked up. "Good morning," he said, his voice neutral, giving her space to set the tone. "Coffee?" "Please." He poured her a cup without asking how she took it, black, strong, in a mug that felt solid and real in her hands. Lydia wrapped both palms around the ceramic, absorbing its warmth. "How did you sleep?" Victor asked. "Better than I expected." Lydia took a sip, grateful for something to do with her hands. "Thank you for letting me stay. I'll get out of your way." "You're not in my way." Victor set his phone down, gave her his full attention. "Are you hungry?" She should say no. Should maintain distance, thank him again, and leave before this became more complicated than it already was. But her stomach chose that moment to betray her with an audible growl. Victor's mouth twitched. "I'll take that as a yes." He moved through the kitchen with efficient grace, pulling eggs and vegetables from the refrigerator, bread from a drawer. Within minutes, the smell of cooking filled the space, butter and herbs, and something that made Lydia's mouth water. "You cook?" she asked, surprised. "I live alone. The alternative is starving or eating out every meal." Victor cracked eggs into a pan with practiced ease. "Besides, cooking requires precision, following steps, controlling variables. I appreciate that." Lydia watched him work, noting the careful movements, the way he seemed to approach even scrambled eggs like a problem to be solved methodically. Everything about Victor Romano suggested control, from the way he dressed to the way he moved to the way he'd extracted her from the peninsula last night, without hesitation or drama. "What do you do?" she asked. "For work, I mean. Consulting. Import-export, various business interests." His tone was casual, but something in it suggested doors closing, subjects not open for discussion. Nothing as noble as teaching kindergarten. Lydia blinked. How did you know I teach kindergarten? You mentioned it last night, between the tiers. Victor plated the eggs, added toast, set the plate in front of her. You said you made less in a year than your dress cost for the party. She had said that. The memory was fuzzy, wrapped in shock and whiskey, but it surfaced now. I love teaching, she said quietly. It's the one thing James never touched, never controlled. My classroom, my kids, that was mine. Then don't lose it. Victor sat across from her with his own plate. Whatever happens next, hold on to the things that are yours. They ate in comfortable silence. The eggs were perfect, fluffy and rich, seasoned just right. Lydia couldn't remember the last time someone had cooked for her. James never had. Cooking was staff work or restaurant work, or occasionally her work when he wanted to impress clients with a home-cooked meal that she'd spent all day preparing. I need to figure out where to stay, Lydia said eventually. James gave me until February 15th to move out of the house, but I can't go back there. I can't. She stopped, her throat tight. I can't sleep in that house knowing my marriage ended and he's already moved on. Stay here. Lydia's head snapped up. What? I have space. 3 guest rooms, like I said. Stay until you figure out your next move. Victor's expression was calm, reasonable, like he was proposing the most logical solution in the world. No rent, no expectations, just time and space to breathe. I can't accept that. Why not? Because I don't know you, because this is insane, because, Lydia gestured helplessly, because people don't just offer their homes to strangers they met crying in a stairwell. I do. The certainty in his voice stopped her protests. Victor leaned back in his chair, studying her with those dark, penetrating eyes. Let me be clear about something, Lydia. I don't make offers I don't mean. I don't waste time on things that don't matter to me. And for reasons I'm still figuring out myself, you matter. He paused. You need space from your ex-husband. You need time to figure out your next steps. I have space, and I'm rarely here. It's a practical solution. Nothing about this is practical. Then call it impractical. Call it whatever you want. But say yes. Lydia stared at him, her heart pounding. Every instinct she'd cultivated over 7 years of marriage screamed at her to refuse, to be careful, to protect herself. But those instincts had led her to a loveless marriage and a divorce signed in a hotel hallway. Maybe it was time to stop listening to them. 1 week, she heard herself say. I'll stay 1 week while I look for an apartment. Then I'm gone. Victor's expression didn't change, but something flickered in his eyes. Satisfaction, maybe. Or victory. 1 week, he agreed. Starting now. That afternoon, Victor drove Lydia back to Lincoln Park. The house looked exactly as she'd left it. A 3-story graystone in a neighborhood full of young families and old money. She and James had bought it 5 years ago, back when she'd still believed they were building something together. Now it just looked cold. Victor parked on the street, turned off the engine, but didn't move to get out. Do you want me to come in? He asked. Lydia looked at the house, her stomach churning. No, I need to do this alone. I'll wait here. She wanted to argue, but the relief she felt knowing he'd be there when she came back out was too strong. Lydia nodded, grabbed her purse, and forced herself out of the car. The front door opened with her key. James hadn't changed the locks yet. Small mercy. The house was silent, empty. James was probably at the office, or maybe with Catherine Meredith, celebrating his freedom. Lydia climbed the stairs to the bedroom she'd stopped sharing with James 2 years ago. Her bedroom now, or it had been. The room was exactly as she'd left it, neat, impersonal, like a hotel. She pulled a suitcase from the closet and started packing. Clothes first. She grabbed the comfortable things, the pieces James had never liked because they weren't elegant enough or didn't project the right image. Jeans and sweaters and the soft pajamas she wore when she was alone. She left behind the cocktail dresses, the silk blouses, the designer heels that had never felt like hers anyway. Then personal items, her books, poetry, and fiction James had thought frivolous. Photos from before the marriage, when she'd still smiled with her whole face. Her mother's jewelry box, modest and precious. the wooden elephant a student had given her last year. She was packing her bathroom toiletries when she heard the front door open downstairs. Lydia froze. James wasn't supposed to be home. He never came home before 6, never disrupted his perfectly scheduled workday. "Lydia?" His voice carried up the stairs, sharp with irritation. "What the hell are you doing here?" She took a breath, steadied herself, and walked out to the landing. James stood at the bottom of the stairs, still in his suit, his expression thunderous. "Packing," she said, proud that her voice didn't shake. "You gave me until February to move out. I'm starting early. You disappeared last night, left the party without a word. Do you have any idea how that looked?" James climbed the stairs, his face flushed. "I had to make excuses, tell people you weren't feeling well. Amanda Whitmore spent 20 minutes asking me if everything was all right with us. Everything is not all right with us. You divorced me, remember? I divorced you cleanly, quietly, and you repaid me by running off and making a scene." Lydia stared at him. "Making a scene? I signed your papers and left. That's what you wanted." "I wanted you to stay at the party, smile, pretend everything was normal until the end of the night. Was that really too much to ask?" James reached the landing, looming over her. "Where did you even go?" "That's none of your business." His eyes narrowed. "You're still my wife. For 60 more days. After that, you don't get to ask me questions." Lydia moved past him, back into the bedroom, continuing her packing. "I'll be out by the end of the week. You'll have your house back." James followed her, standing in the doorway. "Where are you going?" "Does it matter?" "Yes, it matters. The divorce isn't final yet. If you're planning to contest anything in the settlement, I'm not contesting anything." Lydia folded a sweater with careful precision. "I don't want your money or your house or anything else. I just want to be done." "Then where are you staying?" She looked up at him, this man she'd spent 7 years trying to please, and felt nothing. No anger, no grief, no love, just emptiness. "With a friend," she said. It wasn't exactly a lie. Victor had offered friendship along with the apartment. Close enough. James's expression shifted, something calculating entering his eyes. "What friend?" "You don't have friends." The words hit like a slap. True, maybe. She'd let her friendships wither over the years, too focused on being James's wife to maintain her own connections. But hearing him say it so dismissively, like her isolation was a fact rather than a failure, made something hot and sharp flare in her chest. "I'm meeting people," she said, "expanding my social circle, moving on with my life." "Right." James's tone dripped skepticism. "Well, whoever this friend is, make sure they understand the terms of our separation. No cohabitation with romantic partners until the divorce is final, or you forfeit the settlement." "There's no romantic partner, just someone helping me get back on my feet." "Fine, but Lydia..." James moved into the room, lowering his voice. "Don't do anything stupid. Don't make this messy. We had an agreement." "We did," Lydia agreed, "and I'm honoring it. I signed your papers, I'm leaving your house, and after February you'll never have to see me again." She zipped the suitcase closed. "Exactly what you wanted." She grabbed the suitcase handle, shouldered her bag, and walked past him without looking back. Down the stairs, through the hallway lined with photos of a marriage that had never been real. Out the front door into the weak December sunlight. Victor's Mercedes still sat at the curb. He stood beside it now, leaning against the hood, his posture relaxed but his eyes sharp, tracking every movement. When he saw her, he straightened, opened the trunk without a word. Lydia loaded her suitcase, then glanced back at the house. James stood in the doorway, watching. His expression was unreadable, but his posture radiated disapproval. "That's your friend?" James called out. "Lydia, who is that?" She didn't answer, just climbed into the passenger seat and closed the door. Victor got behind the wheel, started the engine. "All right? Drive," Lydia said. "Please just drive." He did. They pulled away from the curb, leaving James standing on the front steps of a house that had never been a home. Lydia didn't look back. "He seemed pleased to see you," Victor observed dryly. Despite everything, Lydia laughed. It came out shaky but real. "That's James, always concerned about appearances. What did he want?" "To know where I was staying, to make sure I wasn't contesting the settlement. To remind me I don't have friends. She looked out the window, watching Lincoln Park blur past. To keep control, basically, even now. Victor's hands tightened on the wheel, just slightly. Does he know where you're staying? I told him with a friend. He doesn't need to know more than that. They drove in silence for a while. Lydia watched the city roll by. Familiar streets, familiar landmarks, all of it looking different now. Like she was seeing Chicago for the first time without James's expectations filtering her vision. Thank you, she said quietly, for waiting, for being there. I said I would be. I know, but most people don't mean things like that. Victor glanced at her, something unreadable in his expression. I'm not most people. No, Lydia thought, he really wasn't. That evening, Lydia stood in the guest room, her room now, for the next week, and tried to process the last 24 hours. Divorced. Homeless. Living with a stranger. Her life had been upended so completely she couldn't find solid ground. A knock on the door interrupted her spiral. Come in, she called. Victor entered carrying a glass of wine. He handed it to her without comment, then gestured to the window. Dinner's ready when you are, but there's no rush. Lydia took the wine, grateful. You don't have to keep feeding me. I know. Or letting me stay here. I know that too. Victor leaned against the doorframe, studying her. Are you always this bad at accepting help? I'm not used to needing it. Everyone needs help sometimes. The trick is knowing when to accept it. He paused. Come eat, Lydia. You've had a hell of a day. Let yourself have something good. Something good. The concept felt foreign, but Lydia followed him to the dining room where he'd set out a simple meal, pasta, salad, bread. They ate at the long table, the city glittering beyond the windows, and talked about nothing important. Books, music, the ridiculousness of Chicago winters, safe topics that didn't require her to explain or justify or defend. What made you leave the party last night? Lydia asked eventually. Before you found me, I mean. You said you weren't the charity gala type. Victor set down his fork, considering. I had business there. A meeting, technically. But it ended early, and I was leaving when I saw you in the stairwell. Business at a Christmas party? Business happens everywhere. His tone suggested the subject was closed. Why kindergarten? The subject change was obvious, but Lydia let it slide. Because 5-year-olds are honest. They tell you exactly what they think, exactly what they feel. There's no pretense, no games, just truth. She smiled, remembering. I had a student last year who told me every single day that my hair looked like a bird's nest. Every day. Finally, I asked him why he kept saying it, and he said, because it's true, and true things are important. Victor laughed. A real laugh, surprised and genuine. Smart kid. The smartest. He's in first grade now, probably telling his new teacher uncomfortable truths. Lydia took a sip of wine. I love that about children. Before the world teaches them to lie, to hide, to be what other people want. They're just themselves. When did you stop being yourself? The question landed like a stone. Lydia stared into her wine glass, watching the liquid catch the light. I don't know, she admitted. Somewhere between 23 and 30, somewhere between I love you and I want a divorce. Her voice cracked. I just wanted him to see me, to choose me. So I kept folding myself smaller and smaller until there was almost nothing left. But not nothing, Victor said quietly. You're still here. Barely. Barely is enough. You start from barely and build. He leaned forward, his expression intense. You want to know what I see when I look at you, Lydia? I see someone who survived 7 years of being diminished and still managed to walk away. Someone who signed divorce papers and didn't make a scene, not because she was weak, but because she was smart enough to know the battle wasn't worth fighting. Someone strong enough to accept help from a stranger because she recognized she needed it. Lydia's eyes burned. I don't feel strong. Strong people rarely do. They're too busy surviving to notice. They finished dinner in silence. Victor cleared the plates, refused her offer to help, then poured them both another glass of wine. They moved to the living room, to the leather sofas facing those impossible windows and the city stretched out below. Can I ask you something? Lydia said. Always. Why are you helping me? And don't say it's practical or that I needed space. There's more to it than that. Victor was quiet for a long moment, swirling wine in his glass. When he spoke, his voice was careful, measured. I told you I understand what it's like to be underestimated. That's true. I also understand what it's like to be controlled by someone who sees you as an asset rather than a person. He looked at her directly. My father was a powerful man, successful, connected, and he had very specific ideas about who I should be and what I should become. For years, I tried to meet those expectations, tried to be the son he wanted. What happened? I stopped trying. I walked away, built my own life, became my own man. Victor's expression hardened. But I remember what it felt like, that pressure to be smaller, quieter, more convenient. I remember how it eats at you until you're not sure who you are anymore. Lydia absorbed this, seeing new dimensions to the man sitting across from her. Is your father still alive? No, he died 5 years ago. We never reconciled. Victor said it without emotion, but Lydia heard the weight underneath. I don't regret leaving, but I regret the time I wasted trying to be what he wanted before I finally broke free. I wasted 7 years. Then don't waste more. You're out now. Build from here. Lydia looked at him, this stranger who'd become something else in less than a day. Someone who saw her. Someone who understood. Someone who'd offered her shelter without asking for anything in return. I don't know how to build, she whispered. I only know how to survive. Then I'll teach you. Victor's voice was absolutely certain. One day at a time, one choice at a time, you'll remember who you are. And if I don't like who I am, then you become someone you do like. He leaned forward, his dark eyes holding hers. You get to choose now, Lydia. That's what freedom means. No one else's expectations, no one else's approval, just you deciding what matters. The words settled into her chest, heavy and real. Freedom, choice, the possibility of becoming rather than just surviving. I don't know where to start, she admitted. Start with tomorrow. Wake up, decide what you want from the day, and do that. Then do it again the next day, and the day after that. Eventually, you'll have built a life. It sounded so simple when he said it, so possible. Lydia finished her wine, set the glass down, and looked out at Chicago sparkling in the darkness. Somewhere out there, James was probably with Catherine Meredith, celebrating his freedom. Somewhere out there, her classroom waited, full of honest 5-year-olds who told uncomfortable truths. Somewhere out there, a new life waited to be built. Okay, she said softly. Tomorrow. I'll start tomorrow. Victor smiled, small but genuine. Good. They sat in comfortable silence, watching the city lights flicker and fade, two people who'd found each other in the darkness and decided to hold on. And for the first time in 7 years, Lydia felt something she'd almost forgotten. Hope. The next morning, Lydia woke with purpose for the first time in months. She showered, dressed in jeans and a sweater that actually felt like hers, and found Victor already in the kitchen reading the Wall Street Journal with his coffee. I'm going back to work today, she announced. Victor looked up, his expression carefully neutral. School doesn't start until after New Year's. I know, but there's lesson planning, classroom prep, paperwork I've been avoiding. Lydia poured herself coffee, feeling steadier than she had in days. I need to do something normal, something that's mine. Then go. Victor folded his paper. Do you need a ride? I can take the train. I know you can. I asked if you needed a ride. Lydia looked at him, this man who kept offering help without making her feel small for needing it. A ride would be nice. Thank you. 20 minutes later, they pulled up to Hawthorne Elementary, a brick building in Lakeview with cheerful murals painted on the exterior walls. The parking lot was nearly empty. Winter break meant only administrators and the occasional dedicated teacher showed up. What time should I pick you up? Victor asked. You don't have to. Lydia. His tone was patient but firm. What time? 3 o'clock? I'll be here. She believed him. That was the strange part. She actually believed Victor would be exactly where he said he'd be, exactly when he said he'd be there. The reliability felt foreign after years of James's broken promises and last-minute cancellations. The school was quiet, almost eerie without the usual chaos of children. Lydia's footsteps echoed down empty hallways decorated with construction paper snowflakes and crayon drawings of Santa. She unlocked her classroom door and stepped inside. The space welcomed her like an old friend. 20 small desks arranged in clusters, a reading corner with oversized pillows, walls covered in alphabet charts and student artwork. Her desk sat in the corner, buried under stacks of papers she'd been too exhausted to grade before the holiday break. Lydia set down her bag and got to work. She graded spelling tests and art projects, updated her lesson plans for January, reorganized the book corner. The familiar routine soothed something raw inside her. This was hers. James had never touched this space, never influenced her teaching, never made her feel inadequate here. In this classroom, she was Miss Park, beloved teacher, creative lesson planner, the adult who remembered every student's favorite color and listened to their rambling stories about their weekend adventures. "Lydia, that you?" She looked up to find Principal Morrison standing in the doorway, coffee mug in hand, eyebrows raised in surprise. "Hi, Angela. Just catching up on some work." Angela entered the classroom, settling into one of the tiny student chairs with practiced ease. "During winter break? Girl, you need a hobby." "This is my hobby." "That's deeply sad." Angela took a sip of coffee, studying Lydia with the sharp eyes that missed nothing. "You look different. Something happened?" Lydia hesitated. Angela was more than just her boss. They'd started at Hawthorne the same year, had survived difficult parents and budget cuts and standardized testing together. But admitting her marriage had imploded felt like making it real in a way she wasn't ready for. "James and I separated," she said finally. "Divorced, actually. Papers were signed on Christmas Eve." Angela's eyes widened. "Oh, honey, I'm so sorry." "Don't be. It was—" Lydia searched for the right word. "Overdue. We've been done for a long time. We just finally made it official." "Are you okay? Where are you staying?" "With a friend. I'm fine, really. Just needed to be somewhere normal for a while." Angela looked skeptical, but didn't push. "Well, if you need anything, time off, someone to talk to, help finding an apartment, just say the word. We take care of our own here." Kindness made Lydia's throat tight. "Thank you. That means a lot." They talked for a while about school business, the new reading curriculum, the upcoming parent-teacher conferences, the student who'd announced to everyone that babies came from Amazon Prime. Normal, mundane, blessedly uncomplicated conversation. When Angela finally left, Lydia felt lighter. She worked until 2:30, then packed up her things and headed outside. Victor's Mercedes was already waiting, right where he'd said it would be. "Productive day?" he asked as she slid into the passenger seat. "Very. I forgot how much I loved that classroom." Lydia buckled her seatbelt. "How was your day?" "Meetings, conference calls, the usual." Victor pulled into traffic with smooth precision. "I need to go to my office later tonight. There's a situation that requires my attention." Something in his tone made Lydia glance over. His expression was carefully blank, but tension radiated from his shoulders. "Everything okay?" "It will be." Victor's hands tightened on the wheel. "Some business associates are having a disagreement. I need to mediate." "At night?" "These particular associates prefer evening meetings." He said it casually, but Lydia heard the warning underneath, "Don't ask more questions." She didn't, but curiosity gnawed at her. Victor Romano remained a mystery. His business vague, his past shadowy, his entire life carefully compartmentalized. She knew he was wealthy, connected, and accustomed to control. But beyond that, he was a stranger she was living with. A stranger who'd shown her more kindness in 3 days than her husband had in 7 years. They returned to the penthouse. Victor disappeared into his home office while Lydia made herself tea and curled up on the sofa with a book. The city glittered beyond the windows, Chicago settling into evening. Around 8 o'clock, Victor emerged wearing all black. Black suit, black shirt, black tie. He looked dangerous dressed like that, like someone you didn't cross. "I'll be back late," he said. "Don't wait up. There's food in the fridge if you're hungry." "Be careful," Lydia said, not sure why she felt the need to say it. Victor paused at the door, looking back at her. Something flickered across his face, surprise maybe, or something softer. I will, he promised. Then he was gone. Lydia tried to read, but her mind kept wandering. Where was Victor going? Who were these business associates who met at night? What kind of consulting required mediation in dark suits at 8 p.m.? She thought about the way people at the peninsula had looked at him. Respectful, yes, but also wary. The way the valet had appeared instantly when they'd arrived. The way Victor moved through the world with absolute confidence, like he was used to people getting out of his way. Lydia fell asleep on the sofa around midnight, her book forgotten on her lap. She woke to the sound of the door opening. Disoriented, she sat up, her heart pounding. Victor stood in the entryway, still in his black suit, but now his knuckles were bruised and there was blood on his collar. "Victor, what happened?" He looked surprised to see her awake. "Nothing. Go back to sleep." "You're bleeding." "It's not my blood." He said it so calmly, so matter-of-factly, that it took Lydia a moment to process the words. "Whose blood is it?" Victor's expression shuddered. "Someone who made a poor decision. It's handled now." He moved past her toward his bedroom, clearly intending to end the conversation, but Lydia stood blocking his path. "Victor, what do you really do?" He looked down at her, his dark eyes unreadable. For a long moment he didn't answer. Then he sighed, the sound heavy with resignation. "Come sit down." They returned to the living room. Victor poured himself a whiskey, drank it in one swallow, then poured another. Lydia waited, her heart hammering against her ribs. "You asked what I do for work," Victor said finally, settling into the chair across from her. "The truth is complicated. Try me. I run a network of businesses. Legitimate ones mostly. Import-export, real estate, several restaurants, and nightclubs. But I also have connections to less legitimate enterprises. Protection services, conflict resolution, influence." He met her eyes directly. "I'm what some people would call a crime boss, though I prefer to think of myself as a businessman who operates in gray areas." The words hung in the air between them. Lydia should have been shocked, terrified, should have run immediately. But instead she felt an odd sense of things clicking into place. The careful evasions, the night meetings, the way people looked at him with respect and fear. "Are you part of the Mafia?" she asked. "The Mafia is an outdated term. I'm part of a network, an organization with roots in many communities. We provide services that exist outside legal frameworks. We protect our own. We handle problems that the police can't or won't address." Victor leaned forward. "I'm telling you this because you deserve to know who you're living with, what you've gotten yourself into by accepting my help." "Am I in danger?" "No." His answer was immediate, absolute. "No one touches you. No one even looks at you wrong. You're under my protection now, whether you want to be or not." Lydia absorbed this, trying to reconcile the man who'd cooked her breakfast with the crime boss, who'd returned home with blood on his collar. "The mediation tonight," she said slowly. "Someone crossed you?" "Someone thought they could skim profits from one of my businesses. I explained why that was unwise." Victor's tone was cold, businesslike. "He won't make that mistake again." "Did you kill him?" "No, but I hurt him enough that he'll remember the lesson." Lydia should have been horrified, should have grabbed her suitcase and left immediately. Instead, she found herself asking, "Why are you telling me this? You could have kept lying." "Because lies are what your husband gave you. I won't do that." Victor set down his glass. "You need to understand what I am, Lydia. I'm not a good man. I've done things that would turn your stomach. I operate outside the law because the law doesn't serve people like me. I control territory, I enforce rules, and when people break those rules, I make them pay." "But you're helping me." "Yes." "Why?" Victor was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was softer. "Because you needed help, and no one else was offering it. Because I saw something in you that reminded me of myself before I became this." He gestured at himself, the expensive suit, the bruised knuckles, the blood. Someone who'd been made small by someone powerful. Someone who deserved better. Lydia's chest felt tight. "I don't know what to do with this information. You have 3 choices. You can leave. I'll help you find an apartment, set you up financially, make sure you're safe. No hard feelings. You can stay and pretend you don't know what I really do, or you can stay knowing exactly who I am and decide if that's something you can live with. Victor stood. Think about it. Take your time. Whatever you decide, I'll respect it. He headed toward his bedroom, then paused at the doorway. For what it's worth, Lydia, I would never hurt you. That's not a line I cross, but I understand if knowing what I'm capable of changes how you see me. Then he was gone, leaving her alone with impossible choices. Lydia didn't sleep that night. She lay in the guest bed, staring at the ceiling, trying to process everything. Victor Romano was a criminal. He hurt people. He operated outside the law. He was dangerous. He'd also been nothing but kind to her, protected her, offered her shelter without asking for anything in return, seen her when everyone else looked through her. As dawn broke over Chicago, Lydia made her decision. She found Victor in the kitchen, showered and dressed in a fresh suit, his bruised knuckles the only evidence of last night's violence. He looked up when she entered, his expression carefully neutral. "Coffee?" he offered. "I'm staying," Lydia said. Victor went very still. "You're sure?" "No, but I'm staying anyway." She moved to the coffee pot, poured herself a cup with steady hands. "I don't understand your world, Victor. I don't know if I can reconcile who you are with what you do. But I know that you've been honest with me when you could have lied. You've helped me when you didn't have to, and right now that matters more than the rest." "You might change your mind." "I might," Lydia agreed. "But until I do, I'm here." Something shifted in Victor's expression. Relief, maybe, or gratitude. He nodded once, accepting her decision without argument. They drank their coffee in silence, two people who'd chosen each other despite every reason not to. The next few days settled into an unexpected rhythm. Lydia spent her mornings at school preparing for the spring semester. Victor worked from home most days, his office door closed for hours while he conducted business she didn't ask about. They cooked dinner together, trading stories about their days with careful omissions on both sides. Lydia didn't mention James's increasingly aggressive texts demanding to know where she was staying. Victor didn't mention whatever conflicts he was managing in his criminal network. It was strange, domestic, almost comfortable, but it couldn't last. On Thursday afternoon, Lydia's phone rang. Unknown number. She almost didn't answer, but something made her pick up. "Is this Lydia Park?" A woman's voice, professional and clipped. "Yes. Who's calling?" "Detective Sarah Chen, Chicago Police Department. I need to ask you some questions about your relationship with Victor Romano." Lydia's blood went cold. "I don't understand." "Mr. Romano is a person of interest in an ongoing investigation. We have reason to believe you've been residing at his apartment for the past week. I'd like to speak with you about the nature of your relationship and anything you might know about his business activities." I don't know anything about his business." "Then you won't mind coming down to the station to discuss it. Today would be best." Detective Chen's tone left no room for argument. "We're at the district station on Halstead. Can you be here by 5? Lydia's hands shook. "Do I need a lawyer?" "That's your right, of course. But this is just a conversation, Mrs. Park. We're trying to understand Mr. Romano's network. Your cooperation would be noted." The call ended. Lydia stared at her phone, her heart racing. The police were investigating Victor. They knew she was living with him. They wanted information. She should have called a lawyer, should have refused to go. Instead, she called Victor. He answered on the first ring. "What's wrong?" "The police called. A Detective Chen. She wants to talk to me about you." "About your business?" Lydia's voice came out shaky. "Victor, what's happening?" Silence. Then, "Where are you?" "At school. I'm leaving now." "Don't go anywhere. I'm coming to get you. Don't talk to anyone until I get there." He hung up. Lydia grabbed her bag with trembling hands and headed for the parking lot. Her mind raced. Investigation. Police. Person of interest. The words circled like vultures. She'd known Victor was dangerous, but knowing and facing the reality of police involvement were two different things. Victor's Mercedes screeched into the parking lot 12 minutes later. He was out of the car before it fully stopped, his expression darker than she'd ever seen it. "Get in." Lydia obeyed. Victor peeled out of the parking lot, driving with controlled fury. His jaw was clenched, his knuckles white on the steering wheel. "Tell me exactly what she said," he demanded. Lydia recounted the conversation word for word. Victor's expression grew grimmer with every sentence. "Chen," he muttered. "Of course it's Chen. She's been trying to build a case against me for 2 years. Now she thinks she can use you to get information." "What kind of case?" "Racketeering, money laundering, extortion, the usual accusations." Victor's tone was bitter. "She has nothing concrete or I'd already be arrested. So she's fishing, looking for weak points in my network. And I'm a weak point. You're someone new in my life, someone she thinks might not be loyal yet, someone she can pressure or manipulate into giving her what she wants." Victor glanced at her. "Did you agree to meet with her?" "She said 5 o'clock today. I didn't confirm." "Good. You're not going." "Victor, I can't just ignore the police." "Yes, you can. You're not under arrest. You haven't been subpoenaed. This is a voluntary interview, which means you have zero obligation to participate." He took a sharp turn, heading toward downtown. "We're going to see my lawyer. He'll handle this." 20 minutes later, they sat in a glass-walled conference room at Walsh and Associates, facing a man in his 50s with silver hair and the confident demeanor of someone who'd never lost an argument. "Detective Chen is persistent, I'll give her that," Robert Walsh said, reviewing the notes Victor had provided. "But she's also desperate. This fishing expedition proves she doesn't have enough evidence to move forward with charges." "What does she want from me?" Lydia asked. "Information. Confirmation of Victor's activities. Anything she can use to strengthen her case or pressure him into making a mistake." Walsh leaned back in his chair. "The good news is you don't know anything useful. The bad news is Chen won't believe that until she's questioned you herself." "So what do I do?" "You refuse to speak with her without counsel present. If she persists, we'll arrange a formal interview with me in the room, but I strongly advise you to exercise your Fifth Amendment rights and decline to answer any questions about Victor or his business affairs." Lydia looked at Victor. He sat perfectly still, his expression unreadable, but tension radiated from every line of his body. "This is my fault," she said quietly. "I brought this into your life by staying with you. James probably told them where I was." "This isn't your fault," Victor interrupted, his voice sharp. "Chen has been circling for years. She would have found another angle, if not this one. But now I'm involved. Now I'm part of whatever she's investigating." "Then we handle it together." Victor turned to Walsh. "I want around-the-clock protection on Lydia. Chen plays dirty when she's desperate. I don't want her harassed or followed or pressured." Walsh nodded. "I'll arrange it. And I want you to reach out to Chen directly. Let her know that any contact with Lydia goes through you. Make it clear that we're not cooperating with her fishing expedition." "Consider it done." They left the law office as the sun set over Chicago, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple. Victor drove in tense silence, his jaw still clenched. "I'm sorry," Lydia said finally. "For what?" "For complicating your life. For being a liability." Victor pulled over abruptly, parking on a side street. He turned to face her, his expression intense. "Listen to me very carefully, Lydia. You are not a complication. You are not a liability. You are someone I chose to help, and I don't regret that choice." His voice softened slightly. "Chen is doing what she always does, looking for pressure points, trying to create problems where none exist. She wants me isolated, wants everyone around me to decide I'm too dangerous to associate with. Don't give her that satisfaction." "I'm scared," Lydia admitted. "I know, but you're also stronger than you think. You survived 7 years with a man who tried to erase you. You can survive a detective asking questions you don't have to answer." Lydia wanted to believe him, but fear sat heavy in her chest, cold and paralyzing. They returned to the penthouse in silence. Victor made calls from his office, while Lydia tried to grade papers and failed miserably. Her hands shook too much to hold the pen. Her mind kept circling back to Detective Chen and investigations, and the reality that she was now entangled in Victor's dangerous world. Around 9 p.m., her phone rang. James. She almost didn't answer, but something made her pick up. "Did you talk to the police?" James demanded without preamble. Lydia's stomach dropped. "How did you know about that?" Because Detective Chen called me this afternoon asking questions about your whereabouts and associates. She wanted to know if I was aware you were living with a known criminal. James's voice dripped with disgust. What the hell are you doing, Lydia? You've been divorced for less than a week, and you're already shacking up with a mobster. My living situation is none of your business. It is when the police are asking me questions, when they're implying that my ex-wife might be involved in criminal activities. James's tone turned vicious. I told you not to do anything stupid. I told you not to make this messy. And what do? You move in with someone the police are actively investigating. You told them where I was, Lydia said, the realization hitting her. You gave Detective Chen Victor's name. Of course I did. I'm not going to lie to the police to protect your poor judgment. If you want to ruin your life, that's your choice. But I won't be dragged down with you. Rage, hot and clean, flooded through Lydia. You divorced me at a Christmas party. You replaced me before the ink was dry on the papers. You spent 7 years making me feel worthless. And now you have the audacity to lecture me about poor judgment? At least I didn't take up with a criminal. No, you just destroyed someone who loved you because it was convenient. Victor Romano has shown me more respect in 1 week than you did in 7 years, so forgive me if I don't value your opinion on my choices. She hung up before James could respond. Her hands shook with adrenaline and fury. Victor appeared in the doorway, his expression concerned. That sounded intense. James confirmed he told Detective Chen about you, about us. Lydia threw her phone onto the sofa. He's the reason she's investigating me. He gave her my connection to you. Victor's expression went cold. Of course he did. I'm sorry. Stop apologizing. Victor crossed the room, standing in front of her. Your ex-husband is a petty man trying to maintain control over someone who walked away from him. He weaponized the police because he couldn't accept that you moved on. That's on him, not you. But now you're dealing with more scrutiny. I can handle Detective Chen. What I need to know is if you can handle this. Victor's dark eyes searched hers. Because it's going to get worse before it gets better. Chen will keep pushing, your ex-husband will keep causing problems, and being associated with me will bring complications you never asked for. If that's too much, I need to know now. Lydia thought about running, about finding a safe apartment far away from Victor's dangerous world and Detective Chen's investigation, about rebuilding her life without the threat of criminal entanglements. But she also thought about the way Victor had seen her when no one else had, the way he'd offered shelter without conditions, the way he'd been honest about who he was instead of hiding behind lies. She thought about 7 years of making herself smaller to please someone who'd never valued her anyway. She was done being small. I can handle it, Lydia said firmly. Whatever comes next, I'm not running. Victor's expression softened, something like pride flickering in his eyes. All right then. We face this together. He pulled her into his arms, the first time he'd touched her beyond a steadying hand or helping her into the car. Lydia let herself lean into his solid warmth, breathing in his scent, allowing herself a moment of feeling safe despite the chaos swirling around them. We'll get through this, Victor murmured against her hair. I promise you that. Lydia wanted to believe him, and for the first time in her life, she thought maybe she could. The morning after James's phone call, Lydia woke to find Victor already dressed in a charcoal suit, his expression grim as he spoke quietly into his phone. When he noticed her in the doorway, he ended the call abruptly. We have a problem, he said without preamble. Lydia's stomach dropped. What kind of problem? Detective Chen showed up at your school an hour ago. She told Principal Morrison she needed to speak with you regarding an ongoing investigation. Angela covered for you, said you were out sick, but Chen left her card and made it clear she'd be back. The coffee Lydia had been about to pour suddenly seemed unappealing. She came to my workplace? She's escalating, trying to pressure you by making your involvement public. Victor's jaw tightened. Walsh is filing a harassment complaint, but it won't stop her immediately. She's banking on you getting scared enough to talk. I am scared. I know, but scared doesn't mean powerless. Victor pulled out his phone, showed her a contact. This is Marcus Webb. He's former FBI, now works private security. He'll be your shadow until this situation resolves. Anywhere you go, he goes. Non-negotiable. Lydia wanted to argue, but the memory of Detective Chen invading her school, her safe space, killed the protest. Okay, good. Walsh also wants to move forward with the formal interview. Get it on record that you have nothing useful to tell Chen. Make her stop harassing you. Victor hesitated. But there's something you need to understand about that interview. What? Chen will try to turn you against me. She'll paint me as a monster, show you evidence of things I've done, try to convince you that staying with me puts you in danger. His dark eyes held hers. Some of what she says will be true. Some will be exaggerated. All of it will be designed to manipulate you into giving her information or cutting ties with me. I'm not going to betray you. You say that now, but you don't know what she has, what she'll show you. Victor's voice was steady, but his expression was strained. I need you to be prepared for that, to see the worst of who I am and what I've done. Lydia crossed the kitchen, stood in front of him. Victor, you told me you weren't a good man. You've been honest about operating outside the law. I'm not naive. I know that means you've hurt people, broken rules, done things most people would consider unforgivable. She took a breath. But you've also been the only person who saw me when I was invisible, who offered help without conditions, who treated me like I mattered. That doesn't erase the other things, but it means something to me. Victor looked at her for a long moment, something vulnerable flickering across his face before his usual mask of control slid back into place. All right, the interview is scheduled for tomorrow at 10 a.m. Walsh will be there, and so will I. You can be in the room? As your attorney's associate, yes. Chen won't like it, but she can't prevent it. A ghost of a smile crossed his face. I want her to see that you're not alone, that she can't isolate you. The next 24 hours crawled by. Marcus Webb appeared at the penthouse that afternoon, a quiet man in his 40s with watchful eyes and an economy of movement that suggested serious training. He was polite but distant, clearly there to do a job rather than make friends. When Lydia went to the grocery store, Marcus followed at a discreet distance. When she tried to go for a walk to clear her head, he was 3 steps behind. It should have felt oppressive. Instead, it felt necessary. That night, Lydia barely slept. She kept imagining the interview, Detective Chen's questions, the evidence Victor had warned her about. When dawn finally broke, she felt exhausted and wired simultaneously. Victor drove them to Walsh's office in silence. Marcus followed in a separate car. The city looked gray and cold, matching Lydia's mood. Victor's hand found hers as they waited at a stoplight, his grip warm and steady. Whatever happens in there, remember that you control the narrative, he said quietly. You decide what you share. You decide when to invoke your Fifth Amendment rights. Chen has no power over you unless you give it to her. Lydia nodded, trying to absorb the confidence he was offering. Walsh met them in the lobby, his expression all business. Detective Chen is already here with her partner, Detective Martinez. They've agreed to conduct the interview in our conference room, which gives us home field advantage. He looked at Lydia directly. Remember, you're here voluntarily. You can leave at any time. You don't have to answer questions that make you uncomfortable. And if at any point you want to stop, you say the word, and we're done. They entered the conference room. Detective Chen sat on one side of the long table, a woman in her late 30s with sharp features and sharper eyes. Her partner, Martinez, was older, heavy-set, with the tired expression of someone who'd seen too much. Chen's gaze went immediately to Victor, her expression hardening. Mr. Romano, I wasn't aware you'd be joining us. Miss Park requested my presence as moral support, Walsh interjected smoothly. Unless you have an objection that would require us to terminate this voluntary interview? Chen's jaw tightened, but she gestured to the chairs across from her. Please, sit. Lydia sat between Walsh and Victor, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. Chen set a digital recorder on the table, stated the date and time and names of everyone present, then turned her attention to Lydia. Thank you for coming in, Mrs. Park. I know this must be stressful. It's Ms. Park, Lydia corrected quietly. The divorce was finalized last week. Of course, my apologies. Chen's smile didn't reach her eyes. Miss Park, can you tell me about your relationship with Victor Romano? He's a friend who offered me a place to stay after my marriage ended. And how did you meet Mr. Romano? At a Christmas party, the Peninsula Hotel Gala on the 24th. Chen made a note. That was quite recent. And yet you're now living with him? I needed a place to stay. Victor had space available. It was a practical arrangement. Practical, Chen repeated, her tone suggesting she didn't believe that for a second. Ms. Park, are you aware of Mr. Romano's business activities? Walsh leaned forward. Detective, my client is under no obligation to speculate about Mr. Romano's business dealings. I'm not asking her to speculate. I'm asking what she knows. Chen's eyes remained fixed on Lydia. Has Mr. Romano discussed his work with you? Lydia remembered Victor's warning about the Fifth Amendment. He's mentioned he's involved in import-export and real estate. And has he mentioned any other activities? Activities that might fall outside legal boundaries? My client declines to answer that question, Walsh said firmly. Chen's expression soured. She pulled a folder from her briefcase, opened it to reveal photographs. She slid them across the table toward Lydia. Do you recognize any of these individuals? Lydia looked down. The photos showed Victor with various men in what looked like restaurant settings, parking lots, street corners. Some of the men looked rough, scarred, tattooed, the kind of people who made you cross the street. Others looked like businessmen. None looked friendly. No, Lydia said honestly. I don't know any of these people. These are known associates of Mr. Romano, members of his criminal organization. Chen tapped one photo. This man, Anthony Caruso, was found beaten nearly to death 3 months ago. He'd been skimming money from one of Romano's operations. This man, she tapped another photo, disappeared after testifying against one of Romano's lieutenants. His body was never found. Lydia's stomach turned. She felt Victor's presence beside her, perfectly still, perfectly controlled. Detective, Walsh said, his voice cold, are you accusing my client of involvement in these alleged crimes? I'm providing context for the type of man she's chosen to associate with. Chen leaned forward. Ms. Park, Victor Romano is dangerous. He runs a criminal enterprise built on violence and intimidation. People who cross him end up hurt or dead. People who get too close to him become targets for his enemies or collateral damage in his conflicts. Is there a question in there? Walsh asked. Chen ignored him, her focus entirely on Lydia. You seem like a smart woman, a kindergarten teacher with no criminal record, no history of violence. So I have to ask, do you understand what you've gotten yourself into? Do you understand that staying with Romano puts you at risk? Lydia met Chen's eyes. I appreciate your concern, Detective, but I'm capable of making my own decisions about who I associate with. Even when those decisions might get you killed? My client is terminating this interview, Walsh said, standing. You've crossed the line from questioning to harassment. But Chen wasn't finished. She pulled out another set of photos, these ones more disturbing. Crime scenes. Blood. Bodies covered with sheets. These are the results of Romano's business dealings. This woman was an informant who worked for us. She was found in the Chicago River with a bullet in her head. This man owned a restaurant that refused to pay Romano's protection fees. His establishment burned to the ground with him inside. Lydia felt bile rise in her throat. Victor's hand found hers under the table, his grip firm but not painful. An anchor. You're showing my client crime scene photos to intimidate her, Walsh said, his voice sharp. This interview is over. Ms. Park has a right to know who she's living with, Chen shot back. She has a right to understand that Victor Romano is a murderer who's avoided prosecution through intimidation and violence. That every day she spends under his roof puts her in danger from his enemies and from law enforcement. We're leaving, Walsh said, gesturing for Lydia to stand. But Lydia remained seated, looking at the photos spread across the table, looking at the evidence of Victor's world, brutal, bloody, unforgiving. This was the reality she'd chosen to accept when she'd decided to stay. This was who Victor Romano really was. Miss Park, Chen said, her voice softening slightly. I can help you. I can get you into protective custody, help you find a safe place to stay, make sure Romano can't retaliate against you. But you have to help me first. Tell me what you know about his operations. Give me something I can use. Lydia looked up at Chen, then at Victor. His expression was carefully blank, but she could see the tension in his jaw, the readiness in his posture. He was prepared for her to break, prepared for her to choose safety over loyalty. I don't know anything about Victor's business operations, Lydia said clearly. I can't help you with your investigation because I have no information to provide. I'm staying with him temporarily while I find permanent housing. That's the extent of our relationship. It was mostly true. And the parts that weren't, the growing connection, the way she felt seen and valued for the first time in years, those weren't Chen's business. Chen's expression hardened. You're making a mistake. That's my right. When something happens to you, and something will happen, Miss Park, because that's what happens to people in Romano's orbit, don't say I didn't warn you. Is that a threat, Detective? Walsh asked coldly. It's a prediction based on 15 years of investigating organized crime. Chen began gathering her photos. But if Ms. Park wants to risk her life for a man she barely knows, that's her choice. Just remember, when things go sideways, the police might not be able to protect you. Walsh ushered Lydia and Victor out of the conference room. They didn't speak until they were in the elevator, descending toward the parking garage. You okay? Victor asked quietly. Lydia thought about the crime scene photos, the bodies, the blood, the evidence of violence that was part of Victor's everyday reality. No, she said honestly, but I will be. Victor's jaw tightened, but he nodded, accepting her answer. They drove back to the penthouse in tense silence. Marcus followed in his car, ever present. When they finally reached the apartment, Lydia went straight to the guest room and closed the door. She sat on the bed, hands shaking, and tried to process what she'd seen. The photos wouldn't leave her mind, particularly the woman pulled from the Chicago River. An informant, Chen had said. Someone who'd worked with police and paid for it with her life. A knock on the door interrupted her spiral. Come in, she called. Victor entered, 2 glasses of whiskey in hand. He offered her one, then sat in the chair by the window, giving her space. I'm sorry you had to see that, he said. Did you kill those people? The ones in the photos? Victor was quiet for a long moment. Some of them, yes. Not all, but enough. The admission should have horrified her. Instead, Lydia felt a strange sense of relief. No lies, no evasions, just truth, brutal and honest. The woman in the river, Lydia said. Did you kill her? No, but I know who did. One of my competitors who wanted to send a message to anyone else thinking about cooperating with law enforcement. Victor's expression was grim. Her death was meant to create fear. It worked. And you've never informed on anyone? Never considered working with police? Never. In my world, that's the unforgivable sin. You can steal, you can fight, you can even kill under the right circumstances. But you never cooperate with law enforcement. You handle your problems internally. He took a sip of whiskey. It's a code. Brutal, maybe, but it keeps our world functioning. Lydia absorbed this, trying to understand a moral framework so different from everything she'd been taught. The man who was beaten for skimming money. Was that the mediation you handled the night I met you? Yes. Did you beat him yourself? I was there. I participated. Victor's gaze was steady, unflinching. He stole from me, Lydia. In my world, that requires a response. If I let it slide, others would see weakness, would think they could take from me without consequences. So you hurt him to send a message. Yes. Lydia stood, paced to the window, looked out at Chicago, stretching below. Somewhere in that city, people lived normal lives, went to work, raised families, followed laws, and somewhere else in that same city, men like Victor operated in shadows, enforcing their own rules with violence. I should be horrified, she said quietly. I should pack my bags and leave and never look back. Yes, you should. But I'm not. Lydia turned to face him. I keep thinking about the fact that you've been honest with me, that you didn't try to hide what you are or sugarcoat the reality. James lied to me every day about loving me, about our marriage, about my worth. You've told me the truth even when it was ugly. Truth doesn't make violence acceptable. No, but it makes you someone I can trust in a strange way. Lydia sat back down on the bed. Chen showed me those photos to scare me, to make me see you as a monster. And maybe you are one, by most people's standards. But you're a monster who's shown me more respect than my own husband did. Victor's expression was unreadable. That's a low bar, Lydia. Maybe. But it's my bar to set. She finished her whiskey, the burn familiar now. I'm not saying I'm comfortable with everything you do. I'm not saying I understand or condone the violence. But I'm saying that I see the whole picture now, the danger, the brutality, the world you operate in, and I'm choosing to stay anyway. Why? It was a fair question. Lydia thought about it, trying to articulate something she barely understood herself. Because for the first time in 7 years, I feel like I matter. Like my choices and my presence make a difference to someone. She met his eyes. You see me, Victor. Not who you want me to be or who would be most convenient for you. Just me. And I'm not ready to give that up, even if keeping it means accepting some uncomfortable truths about your world. Victor set down his glass and crossed to her, kneeling so they were at eye level. His hands framed her face, his touch gentle despite the violence those same hands were capable of. You deserve better than this, he said quietly. Better than a criminal who operates in gray areas and solves problems with his fists. Better than living under police scrutiny and bodyguard protection. Maybe. But I don't want better. I want this. I want you. The words tumbled out before Lydia could stop them, honest and raw. Something shifted in Victor's expression. His thumb traced her cheekbone, his touch reverent. I can't promise you safety. My world is dangerous, unpredictable. People who get close to me become targets. I know. And I can't promise to change. This is who I am, who I've built myself to be. I won't apologize for it. I'm not asking you to. Then what are you asking for? Lydia thought about it. Honesty, respect, the chance to build something real instead of performing for someone else's benefit. She paused. And maybe, eventually, something more than friendship. Victor's eyes darkened. Lydia, I know it's complicated. I know I just got divorced and you're in the middle of a police investigation and this whole situation is insane. But I need you to know that what I'm feeling isn't gratitude or dependency or some misplaced rescue fantasy. It's real. For a long moment, Victor didn't respond. Then he leaned forward and kissed her, soft and careful, giving her time to pull away. Lydia didn't. Instead, she kissed him back, pouring 7 years of invisibility and loneliness and desperate hope into the connection. When they finally broke apart, Victor rested his forehead against hers. This is a terrible idea, he murmured. Probably the worst I've ever had. And you're sure? Not even a little bit, but I'm doing it anyway. Victor laughed, genuine and surprised, the sound transforming his usually controlled expression into something younger and more open. All right then, we'll figure it out as we go. That night, they sat together on the sofa overlooking the city, Lydia tucked against Victor's side, both of them processing the day's revelations and new complications. The interview with Chen had been brutal, but it had also clarified things. Lydia knew now exactly what she was choosing, the danger, the moral complexity, the reality of Victor's world, and she was choosing it anyway. The next morning brought fresh complications. Walsh called before Lydia finished her coffee. Chen filed for a subpoena, he said without preamble. She's demanding Lydia's phone records, financial statements, and formal testimony before a grand jury. Victor's expression went cold. On what grounds? Material witness to ongoing criminal activity. It's a fishing expedition, but she got a friendly judge to sign off on it. Walsh's frustration was evident even through the phone. I'm fighting it, but it'll take time. In the meantime, Lydia needs to be prepared for increased scrutiny. After the call ended, Victor paced the apartment like a caged predator. Lydia watched him, recognizing the controlled fury in his movements. Chen's escalating because the interview didn't give her what she wanted, he said. She's trying to force you into cooperating by making your life difficult. What do? We fight it legally while I handle it practically. Victor pulled out his phone, made a call. Marcus, I need additional security on Ms. Park. Full detail, rotating shifts, and I want surveillance on Detective Chen, legal surveillance. I want to know where she goes, who she talks to, what she's planning. He ended the call and turned to Lydia. I'm also moving forward with the divorce settlement. The longer you're technically tied to James, the more Chen can use that connection to justify her investigation. James won't cooperate. He'll drag it out just to be difficult. A cold smile crossed Victor's face. Let me handle James. That afternoon, while Lydia was at school grading papers, Victor paid a visit to Whitmore and Associates. He didn't call ahead, didn't make an appointment, just walked past the receptionist with the confidence of someone who'd never been told no and found James's office on the third floor. James looked up from his computer, his expression morphing from annoyance to recognition to something like fear. "What are you doing here?" Victor closed the door behind him, locked it. "We need to talk about your ex-wife." "I have nothing to say to you." "That's fine. You can just listen." Victor settled into the chair across from James's desk, perfectly relaxed. "You told Detective Chen about Lydia's living situation. You gave her information designed to cause problems for both of us. That was a mistake." James's face flushed. "The police asked me questions. I answered honestly. That's not a crime." "No, but it was petty, vindictive, an attempt to maintain control over a woman who walked away from you." Victor leaned forward. "Here's what's going to happen, James. You're going to finalize Lydia's divorce settlement immediately. Fair terms, no games, no delays. You're going to transfer her agreed-upon share of the marital assets within 48 hours. And you're going to stop talking to Detective Chen or anyone else about Lydia's private life. And if I refuse, then I make your life very uncomfortable." Victor's voice was pleasant, conversational. "I know about the affair with Catherine Meredith. I know about the campaign contributions you funneled through shell corporations to avoid disclosure requirements. I know about the settlement you paid to the paralegal who accused you of sexual harassment 3 years ago." He smiled. "I have documentation for all of it. Documentation that could ruin your career and reputation if it happened to find its way to the Illinois Bar Association or the Chicago Tribune." James went pale. "That's blackmail. That's leverage. There's a difference." Victor stood. 48 hours, James. Finalize the settlement, transfer the assets, and leave Lydia alone. Do that, and your secrets stay secret. Refuse, and I bury you." He left without waiting for a response, knowing he'd made his point. 2 days later, Lydia received an email from James's attorney. The divorce settlement had been finalized. Her share of the marital assets, more generous than originally offered, had been transferred to her personal account. The house would be sold and profits split. James had agreed to all outstanding terms without contest. Lydia stared at the email in disbelief. "How did you do this?" Victor, reading the morning paper at the kitchen table, didn't look up. "I had a conversation with James. Explained why cooperation was in his best interest." "What kind of conversation?" "The productive kind." Lydia knew she shouldn't ask for details. Knew that Victor's methods probably involved threats or blackmail, or other things she was better off not knowing about. But the result was undeniable. She was free. Truly, legally, financially free from James Park. "Thank you," she said quietly. Victor set down his paper, met her eyes. "You don't have to thank me for protecting what's mine." The possessiveness in his tone should have bothered her. Instead, it sent warmth through her chest. After 7 years of being nobody's priority, being claimed by Victor Romano felt like coming home. The subpoena fight continued, Walsh filing motions and objections while Chen pushed back with increasing aggression. But with James no longer feeding her information and Lydia's divorce finalized, Chen's leverage began to crumble. 2 weeks after the interview, Walsh called with news. The judge quashed the subpoena, ruled that Chen hadn't established sufficient grounds for material witness designation. Walsh sounded satisfied. "She can't compel your testimony or your records. It's over, for now." Relief flooded through Lydia. She won't try again? She might, but she'd need new evidence, and from what I can tell, she's running out of angles. Walsh paused. "You held firm, Lydia. You didn't break under pressure. That matters." After the call ended, Lydia found Victor in his office. He looked up when she entered, reading her expression immediately. "Good news?" "The subpoena was quashed. Chen can't force me to testify." Victor's expression softened. He stood, crossed to her, pulled her into his arms. "It's over then. You're clear." Lydia leaned into his warmth, feeling tension she'd carried for weeks finally release. "I couldn't have done this without you." "Yes, you could have, but I'm glad you didn't have to." Victor tilted her chin up, his dark eyes searching hers. "You've been brave, Lydia, braver than you know." She kissed him then, deep and certain, pouring gratitude and relief and growing love into the connection. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Victor rested his forehead against hers. "Stay with me," he said quietly. "Not just temporarily. Not just until you find an apartment. Stay." Lydia's heart hammered. "Victor, I know it's fast. I know we're still figuring this out, but I don't want you to leave. I want you here, with me, building something real." His voice was rough with emotion. "Say yes." Lydia thought about the guest room she'd been living in, the temporary nature of her arrangement, the way she'd been treating this as a stopgap instead of a choice. She thought about Victor's honesty, his protection, the way he'd fought for her without asking for anything in return. She thought about 7 years of being invisible versus 3 weeks of being seen. "Yes," she whispered. "I'll stay." Victor kissed her again, this time with an intensity that stole her breath. When he finally pulled back, his expression held something she'd never seen before. Hope. "We'll do this right," he promised. "Build something that's ours. No lies, no games, just truth." And for the first time since signing those divorce papers beneath a Christmas tree, Lydia believed in the possibility of something better. Something shifted in the penthouse after Lydia agreed to stay. The guest room became her room in more than just name. Victor helped her move her belongings from storage, hang pictures on the walls, arrange her books on shelves. The space transformed from temporary shelter into something that felt like home. Spring arrived in Chicago with its usual temperamental nature, cold one day and surprisingly warm the next. Lydia returned to teaching with renewed energy, her classroom a bright spot in days that were increasingly complicated by Victor's world. She learned to recognize the signs of his business troubles, the late-night phone calls, the tension in his shoulders, the careful way he'd ask about her day while avoiding details of his own. She learned not to ask questions she didn't want answers to. But she also learned the moments of softness hidden beneath Victor's controlled exterior. The way he'd make her coffee exactly how she liked it without being asked. The way he'd listen to her stories about difficult parents or struggling students with genuine interest. The way he'd pull her close at night and hold her like she was something precious he was afraid of losing. They were building something, slowly, carefully, against all logic and reason. 3 months after Detective Chen's investigation had fizzled, Lydia was grading papers at the dining table when her phone rang. Unknown number. She almost didn't answer, but recent experience had taught her that ignoring unknown calls sometimes created more problems than it solved. "Hello? Lydia Park?" A woman's voice, older, unfamiliar. "Yes. Who's calling?" "My name is Elena Vasquez. I'm a social worker with Chicago Family Services. I need to speak with you about a student of yours, Emma Chen." Lydia's stomach dropped. Emma was one of her kindergartners, a quiet girl with dark eyes and a tendency to draw disturbing pictures during free time. Lydia had filed a concern report with the school counselor 2 weeks ago after Emma had shown up with bruises she couldn't explain. "What about Emma? Is she okay?" "That's what we're trying to determine. We've opened an investigation into her home situation based on your report and some additional evidence. Emma mentioned you specifically as someone she trusts. Would you be willing to meet with me to discuss her case?" "Of course. Anything I can do to help." They arranged to meet the following afternoon at a coffee shop near the school. When Lydia hung up, she found Victor standing in the doorway of his office, his expression concerned. "Everything all right?" She explained about Emma, about the bruises and concerning behavior, about the investigation. Victor listened with the focused attention he brought to everything, his jaw tightening. "You did the right thing, reporting it," he said when she finished. "I know, but I'm worried about what happens to her now. If they remove her from her home, where does she go?" "Foster care can be just as traumatic, one problem at a time." Victor crossed to her, his hands settling on her shoulders. "Meet with the social worker tomorrow. Find out what Emma needs. Then we'll figure out how to help." The certainty in his voice steadied her. Lydia leaned into his touch, grateful for his presence. The meeting with Elena Vasquez the next day was both better and worse than Lydia had anticipated. Emma was being removed from her home immediately. Her father had been arrested on domestic violence charges. Her mother was in the hospital with injuries too severe to hide. Emma and her younger brother were being placed in emergency foster care while the state determined their long-term situation. The problem is finding placement, Elena explained, stirring sugar into her coffee with tired movements. We have very few homes that can take siblings together, and keeping them together is crucial for their emotional well-being. Right now they're separated. Emma in one home, her brother in another. It's not ideal. How long will they be separated? Could be weeks, could be months. We're doing our best, but the system is overwhelmed. Elena looked at Lydia directly. Emma asks about you constantly. You've made a real impact on her. If you have any time to visit, it would help stabilize her during this transition. Lydia agreed immediately, even as her heart broke for the little girl who'd already endured so much. That evening, she told Victor everything. They sat on the sofa overlooking the city, Lydia's head on his shoulder, trying to process the unfairness of a 5-year-old being traumatized by the people who should have protected her. I want to help her, Lydia said quietly. But I don't know how. I'm a teacher, not a foster parent. I don't have training or certification or— You have love, Victor interrupted, and consistency, and the ability to see her as more than a case file. He was quiet for a moment. What if we became her foster parents? Lydia sat up, staring at him. What? You said they need homes that can take siblings. We have space, 3 guest rooms that aren't being used. You have the connection with Emma. I have resources that could help with whatever they need. Victor's expression was serious, thoughtful. I know it's complicated. My background, the police scrutiny, everything, but if there's a way to make it work, shouldn't we try? Victor, you run a criminal organization. The state isn't going to approve you as a foster parent. The state approves Victor Romano, legitimate businessman with clean legal records and substantial financial resources. What I do in shadows doesn't appear on background checks. His dark eyes held hers. I'm not saying it would be easy, but you want to help this child, and I want to help you. Let's at least explore the possibility. Lydia's mind raced. The idea was insane. Impossible. A kindergarten teacher and a crime boss raising traumatized foster children together. But she thought about Emma's quiet voice asking if Miss Park would visit, about a little girl separated from her brother and placed with strangers, about the chance to actually make a difference instead of just documenting suffering. We'd need to get certified, she said slowly. Take classes, pass home inspections, background checks. I'll handle the logistics. You handle the heart. Victor pulled her close. We can do this, Lydia, if you want to. She did want to, more than she could articulate. The certification process was exhausting. 12 weeks of classes every Tuesday and Thursday evening, covering everything from trauma responses to medication management to cultural sensitivity. Home inspections where Lydia held her breath, hoping they wouldn't find anything connected to Victor's real business. Background checks that came back clean because Victor's legal identity was meticulously separated from his criminal activities. Elena Vasquez was their caseworker, her initial skepticism gradually shifting to cautious optimism as she watched Victor and Lydia navigate the process with dedication. She interviewed them separately and together, probing their motivations, testing their commitment. I have to ask, Elena said during one interview, looking at Victor directly. Your relationship with Ms. Park is relatively new. You've been together less than 6 months. Most couples wait years before taking on the responsibility of foster children, especially traumatized ones. What makes you think you're ready? Victor didn't hesitate. Because Lydia sees these children as people who deserve better, and I've built my entire life on the principle of protecting what's mine. Emma and her brother would be mine, our family. I don't take that lightly. Elena studied him for a long moment, then made a note in her file. All right, let's talk about your financial situation. They passed every inspection, completed every requirement, prepared bedrooms for children they didn't yet know they'd get to keep. And through it all, Lydia visited Emma twice a week, bringing books and art supplies and the consistent presence of an adult who showed up when she said she would. Emma blossomed under the attention. She drew less disturbing pictures and more hopeful ones, families holding hands, houses with gardens, smiling suns. She talked about her brother Daniel, how much she missed him, how she wished they could be together. Maybe soon, Lydia told her, not wanting to promise something she couldn't guarantee. People are working very hard to find you and Daniel a home where you can stay together. Do you think they'll find one? Emma's dark eyes were too serious for a kindergartner. I hope so, sweetheart. I really hope so. 2 weeks before the end of the school year, Elena called with news. You've been approved, she said, and Lydia could hear the smile in her voice. The committee reviewed your application and home study. You're certified foster parents. If you're still interested in Emma and Daniel, we'd like to begin transition visits next week. Lydia's hands shook as she ended the call. Victor was at a meeting, something about a shipment dispute she didn't ask about, so she sat alone in the penthouse processing the magnitude of what they'd just committed to. 2 children. Traumatized, struggling children who would need patience and stability and everything she and Victor had to offer. When Victor returned that evening, she met him at the door. We're approved, she said simply. His expression transformed, surprise and pride, and something that looked almost like fear flickering across his face before his usual control reasserted itself. Then he pulled her into his arms and held her tight. When do they come home? Transition visits start next week. If everything goes well, they could move in by mid-June. Victor released her, cupped her face in his hands. Are you ready for this? No, but I'm doing it anyway. Lydia smiled. Seems to be becoming a pattern with me. The transition was carefully managed. First, supervised visits at a neutral location where Emma and Daniel could reconnect while getting to know Victor. Then visits at the penthouse, the children exploring their new rooms with cautious wonder. Daniel was 3, small for his age, with the same dark eyes as his sister and a tendency to hide behind Emma when strangers spoke to him. Victor surprised Lydia with his patience. He didn't push, didn't try to force connection, just existed as a steady presence, offering Daniel toy cars to play with and listening to Emma's rambling stories about her day at school. Slowly, carefully, the children began to trust. On the day they officially moved in, Emma carried a small backpack containing everything she owned in the world. Daniel clutched a stuffed elephant that had seen better days. They stood in the entrance of the penthouse, 2 small figures overwhelmed by the size and luxury of the space. This is your home now, Lydia told them, kneeling to their level. Your rooms, your toys, your family, you're safe here. Emma's eyes filled with tears. Forever? Lydia glanced at Victor, who nodded. Forever, Lydia promised, knowing the complexity of foster care made that promise tenuous, but meaning it with everything she had. That first night was chaos. Daniel cried for his mother even though she'd never protected him. Emma had a nightmare and woke screaming. Lydia spent hours rocking Daniel back to sleep while Victor sat with Emma, his deep voice reading picture books until she relaxed enough to close her eyes. At 3 a.m., Lydia found Victor in the kitchen making coffee, dark circles under his eyes. This is harder than I expected, he admitted quietly. We knew it would be hard. Knowing and experiencing are different things. Victor poured her a cup, added cream the way she liked. I've negotiated million-dollar deals and faced down men twice my size, but a 3-year-old crying for his mother undoes me completely. Lydia leaned against him, exhausted and overwhelmed. We'll figure it out, one day at a time. They did figure it out slowly. Emma thrived with structure and routine, so they established consistent schedules. Daniel needed physical affection, so Lydia held him constantly those first few weeks, building trust through touch. Victor proved surprisingly good at bedtime stories and homework help, his patience with the children's questions apparently infinite. The penthouse transformed. Toys appeared in the living room. Crayon drawings decorated the refrigerator. Laughter echoed through spaces that had been quiet for so long. Lydia watched Victor teaching Emma to play chess and saw a side of him she'd never imagined. Gentle, playful, wholly devoted to these broken children they were trying to help heal. But Victor's other world didn't disappear just because they'd become foster parents. If anything, the complications intensified. One evening in July, Marcus appeared at the door with an urgent expression. Victor spoke with him in low tones, his body language shifting into the controlled tension Lydia recognized as danger. I need to handle something, Victor told her after Marcus left. It might take a few hours. Is it bad? It's complicated. Someone's challenging my territory. I need to address it before it escalates. Lydia thought about Emma and Daniel sleeping peacefully in their rooms, about the life they were building, about the reality that Victor's business could shatter everything at any moment. Be careful, she said, the same words she always said, knowing they were inadequate. Victor kissed her forehead. Always. He left wearing all black, his expression cold in a way that reminded Lydia exactly who he was beneath the gentle foster father exterior. She spent the next 3 hours trying to distract herself with lesson planning and failing miserably. When Victor returned at midnight, his knuckles were bruised, but he was otherwise unharmed. Is it handled? Lydia asked. Yes. The Challenger won't be a problem anymore. She didn't ask what that meant, didn't want to know if someone was dead or merely severely injured, just pulled Victor into the bathroom and cleaned his hands while he watched her with unreadable dark eyes. Does this bother you? He asked quietly. Coming home to evidence of violence? Yes, Lydia answered honestly. But I also understand it's part of who you are, part of the world you operate in. She dried his hands carefully. I'm not naive enough to think you'll change. I just need you to keep it separate from the children. They've seen enough violence. I would never. I know, but I needed to say it anyway. Victor pulled her close, his embrace tight. They're safe with me, Lydia. Always. Whatever I do in the shadows, I would never let that darkness touch them. She believed him. Maybe she was foolish too, but she did. Summer faded into fall. Emma started first grade with Lydia's former colleague as her teacher, thriving in the structured environment. Daniel began preschool 2 mornings a week, slowly becoming more verbal and confident. The nightmares decreased. The fear in their eyes when adults raised their voices gradually disappeared. They were healing, becoming a family. In October, Elena Vasquez made her quarterly home visit. She interviewed the children separately, inspected their rooms, reviewed their school and medical records. When she finished, she sat down with Lydia and Victor in the dining room, her expression thoughtful. I've been doing this job for 15 years, Elena said. I've seen every kind of foster situation imaginable. And I have to tell you, what you've built here is remarkable. Those children have transformed in ways I wouldn't have thought possible 4 months ago. Relief flooded through Lydia. They're incredible kids. They are. But they're incredible because you've given them what they needed: consistency, safety, love. Elena looked at Victor. You've surprised me, Mr. Romano. I had reservations about approving a relatively new couple for sibling placement, but watching you with Daniel and Emma, it's clear you're fully committed. They're my family, Victor said simply. I protect what's mine. Elena nodded, made notes in her file. The biological parents' rights are being terminated next month. Assuming that proceeds as expected, Emma and Daniel will be legally free for adoption. If you're interested in pursuing that, I'd recommend starting the process soon. Adoption. The word hung in the air, heavy with possibility. After Elena left, Lydia and Victor looked at each other across the dining table. Do you want to adopt them? Victor asked. Lydia thought about Emma's laughter when she mastered a new word, about Daniel's small hand in hers as they walked to the park, about bedtime stories and scraped knees and the 1,000 small moments that had woven these children into her heart. Yes, she said. Absolutely yes. Victor smiled, genuine and warm, the expression transforming his usually controlled features. Then we'll make it official, make them legally ours. The adoption process took months. More paperwork, more interviews, more home inspections. Emma and Daniel's biological parents fought the termination half-heartedly before eventually giving up. Elena guided them through each step with experienced efficiency. In March, 9 months after Emma and Daniel had first moved in, the adoption was finalized. They stood in a courtroom, Victor in a suit, Lydia in a blue dress, Emma and Daniel fidgeting in their nice clothes, and listened to the judge declare them a legal family. Emma Romano, Daniel Romano. The names on the official documents made it real in a way nothing else had. Afterward, they celebrated with cake and presents and ridiculous amounts of joy. Emma kept touching the adoption certificate, her fingers tracing the words like she couldn't quite believe they were real. We're really a family now? She asked for the 10th time. We've always been a family, Lydia told her. But now it's official. Forever. Forever, Emma repeated, tasting the word. Then she threw her arms around Lydia's neck and held on tight. That night, after the children were asleep, Lydia found Victor on the balcony overlooking Chicago. The city sparkled below them, familiar and beautiful. He turned when she approached, pulling her into his arms. "Thank you," she said quietly. "For what?" "For seeing me when I was invisible, for offering shelter when I had nowhere to go, for being honest when you could have lied, for building this family with me." Lydia looked up at him. "For everything." Victor's expression softened. "You gave me something I didn't know I needed, purpose beyond power, connection beyond control, a reason to come home that matters more than any business empire." He kissed her then, deep and certain, tasting like promise and hope and the future they were building together. When they finally broke apart, Victor reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. Lydia's breath caught. "Victor, I know we've done everything backward. Started with shelter, added children, built a family before we even defined what we were to each other." He opened the box, revealing a diamond ring that caught the city lights. "But I'd like to make it official, make you legally mine the way the children are. Marry me, Lydia." Tears blurred her vision. She thought about the woman she'd been a year ago, invisible, diminished, signing divorce papers beneath a Christmas tree while her husband walked away without a backward glance. She thought about the journey that had led her here, to this moment, to this man who'd seen her worth when she couldn't see it herself. "Yes," she whispered. "Absolutely yes." Victor slipped the ring onto her finger, his hand steady despite the emotion in his eyes. Then he kissed her again, sealing the promise with the certainty that had defined him from the moment they'd met. They married in May, a small ceremony with just close friends and Walsh serving as Victor's best man. Emma and Daniel were flower girl and ring bearer, delighted by their fancy clothes and important roles. Detective Chen's investigation had long since gone cold, her attempts to build a case against Victor failing for lack of evidence. James had remarried Catherine Meredith and avoided Lydia completely, which suited her perfectly. Lydia Park became Lydia Romano, taking Victor's name with pride instead of obligation. She kept teaching, loved teaching, while Victor continued managing his empire with the same controlled precision he brought to everything. They existed in two worlds simultaneously, navigating the balance between legitimate life and shadow business with careful compartmentalization. It wasn't perfect. Victor still came home with bruised knuckles sometimes. Lydia still struggled with the moral complexity of loving a man who solved problems with violence. Emma and Daniel still had moments where their trauma surfaced in unexpected ways. But they were a family. Real, complicated, messy, beautiful. One evening in late summer, Lydia sat on the balcony watching the sunset paint Chicago in shades of orange and gold. Emma was inside practicing piano while Daniel built elaborate block towers with Victor's patient assistance. The sounds of her family drifted through the open door, laughter and music and life. She thought about the woman she'd been, signing divorce papers in a hotel hallway. Thought about colliding with a stranger in a stairwell and accepting help from someone she should have feared. Thought about every choice that had led her here, to this moment, to this life that was wholly and completely hers. Victor joined her on the balcony, wrapping his arms around her from behind. "What are you thinking about?" "Christmas Eve, a year and a half ago. The worst night of my life that turned into the best thing that ever happened to me." "No regrets?" Lydia turned in his arms, looking up at the man who'd saved her by seeing her. "Not a single one. Even knowing what I am, what I'm capable of? Especially knowing that, because you chose to use that capability to protect instead of harm, to build instead of destroy." She touched his face, her wedding ring catching the light. "You're not a good man by most people's standards, Victor Romano. But you're good to me, good to our children. And that's what matters." Victor kissed her softly, reverently. "I love you, Lydia. More than power, more than control, more than anything I've built in the shadows. You and our family, that's what's real. Everything else is just business." Inside, Daniel called for them, some crisis involving a toppled block tower that required parental intervention. Emma's piano practice hit a discordant note and dissolved into giggles. Normal domestic chaos that was somehow more precious than all the luxury surrounding them. Lydia took Victor's hand and they went inside together, leaving the glittering Chicago skyline behind to join their children. To be present for the small moments that built lives instead of empires. To choose love and family over everything else. She'd started as an invisible woman made small by someone who should have cherished her. She'd been rescued not by a hero, but by a dangerous man with dark eyes and careful hands who'd seen her worth when she couldn't. And together, they'd built something neither had known they needed. A family forged in shadows and raised in light. A love that began with collision and transformed into choice. A life that was messy and complicated and absolutely, perfectly theirs. Lydia Romano stood in her home, surrounded by the laughter of her children and the steady presence of her husband, and felt the truth settle into her bones. She was no longer invisible, no longer small, no longer afraid. She was seen. She was loved. She was home. And that made every impossible choice, every moment of fear, every risk she'd taken, absolutely worth it. This was her life now, her family, her forever. And it was more beautiful than anything she could have imagined.